Okay, let's picture this for a second. A world just shrouded in mist, ruled by superstition and fear. A time of total ignorance, plagues sweeping across continents. A time where the light of reason had just been completely snuffed out. This is the image we all have of the Middle Ages, right? The period that gets branded as the Dark Ages. But how dark were they really? In this explainer, we're going to peel back all those layers of myth and misconception and find out what was really going on in this fascinating and honestly misunderstood era.
So to understand where the myth even comes from, we have to start with the reality. And yeah, the reality was often brutal. This quote from the Italian writer Giovanni Boccaccio talking about the horror of the Black Death, I mean, it is absolutely chilling. It just captures this feeling of an overwhelming random doom. It's from accounts just like this one, raw, visceral, and genuinely terrifying, that the whole idea of a dark age was born. For millions of people, this wasn't some story, it was their life.
And this slide really frames that medieval fear in such an interesting way. Think about it. The Black Death wasn't a prediction or some mystical belief. It was a devastating, undeniable fact. Now compare that to fears we've had more recently, like the Y2K bug. That was a technological problem we thought we could solve with code. Or doomsday prophecies, which are, mystical beliefs. This comparison just shows you how much our entire way of understanding and dealing with risk has fundamentally changed over time. We went from lived horror to technical problems and abstract ideas.
And so that's how we get this term, the Dark Ages. What's funny is it was actually coined centuries later, during the Enlightenment, by thinkers who wanted to make their own age of reason look better by comparison. They basically looked back and saw a 1,000-year nap for the human mind. But here's the question we have to ask. Is that label an accurate description of history, or is it really just a bit of propaganda? Does it tell us more about the Enlightenment's ego than the era it was so quick to dismiss?
Okay, so this is where that popular story really starts to fall apart. Because while yes, Europe was politically a mess after the fall of Rome, the lights of intellectual curiosity didn't just go out, they just moved. We just have to know where to look to find those sparks, those brilliant flickers of reason in what only looked like total darkness.
So, here's a crucial point. The Dark Ages, that was mostly a European experience. While Europe was busy rebuilding, the Islamic world, which stretched all the way from Spain to Persia, was in the middle of a golden age. And critically, it was Islamic scholars who became the librarians of Western civilization. They were painstakingly preserving, translating, and actually building upon the great works of Greek thinkers like Aristotle and Plato. Honestly, without them, all of that knowledge might have been lost to Europe forever.
But even within Europe, you still had these incredible figures desperately trying to build a bridge back to that classical past. And this is one of them, Boethius. You can kind of think of him as one of the last great Roman thinkers and one of the very first medieval ones, a really crucial link. He worked to translate Aristotle's logic from Greek into Latin, making sure those foundational ideas weren't lost to this new emerging European world.
And get this. Boethius wrote his most famous work, The Consolation of Philosophy, under the absolute worst circumstances you can imagine, in a prison cell while he was waiting to be executed. And in his final days, he wasn't praying for a miracle, he was wrestling with Stoic philosophy, trying to use pure reason to make sense of his awful fate. And this quote, wow, it just captures that pain, the idea that remembering happiness is what makes suffering even worse.
Central to his whole way of thinking was this really powerful metaphor, the wheel of fortune. For Boethius, life is just this endlessly spinning wheel. Sometimes you're on top, sometimes you're at the bottom. The thing is, you can't control the wheel. The only thing you can control is how you respond to it, your virtue, your reason. That's the only thing that stays constant in a world that's always changing. It's a profoundly Stoic idea, a flicker of classical reason in a new Christian world. All right, but as the centuries rolled on, a new power rose up and came to dominate European thought, Christianity. And its first great philosophical champion was a man named Augustine of Hippo, a thinker who would literally shape the Western mind for the next 1,000 years.
Now, at the very heart of Augustine's theology is a really radical and powerful idea, predestination. He argued that from the very beginning of time, God, in his infinite wisdom, had already decided the fate of every single human soul. You were either one of the elect, destined for heaven, or one of the condemned, destined for hell, and there was absolutely nothing you could do to change it.
He explained this whole concept through this metaphor of two cities. See, we all live together here on Earth in what he called the city of man. It's a temporary, imperfect world. But living right alongside us in this city are the citizens of another, invisible city, the city of God. These are the elect, and they're just passing through on their way to their real eternal home. It's a worldview where your earthly life is just the opening act for a fate that's already been written.
For centuries, Augustine's view of a world governed by divine fate was pretty much the law of the land. But then, in the 13th century, along came Thomas Aquinas, a thinker who would try to pull off one of the most ambitious intellectual projects in history, to build a bridge between the world of Christian faith and the world of Greek reason. Aquinas was the absolute master of a method called Scholasticism. You can think of it like this. Imagine a university debate hall where every single theological question, from the nature of God to the meaning of sin, was being debated with the same hardcore logic that Aristotle used to analyze biology. That was Scholasticism. It was a bold, and to some people, a totally radical attempt to prove that faith and reason weren't enemies, but were actually two sides of the very same coin. And this simple but really profound quote, this gets to the absolute heart of Aquinas' revolution. The soul is known by its acts. What you do in this world, it matters. Your choices, your actions, your use of reason, these aren't just irrelevant distractions from some predetermined fate. No, they are the very things that define who you are and shape your eternal destiny.
This slide just lays out the shift perfectly. Where Augustine saw predestination, Aquinas saw free will. Where Augustine saw salvation as a gift from God's grace alone, Aquinas said, hold on, it's a partnership. It's achieved through God's grace, yes, but also through our own use of reason and our choice to do good things. He basically put humanity back in the driver's seat.
Okay, so to understand how he pulled this all off, we need to get a handle on one of his most important philosophical tools. Now, it can seem a little abstract at first, but stick with me, because this is the key that unlocks his entire system of thought. And we're going to break it down with two really simple examples.
All right, first things first. Just for a second, think of a yellow house. You've got it, right? You have an idea in your mind of what a yellow house is. You know its qualities, its definition, what makes it a yellow house.
That idea in your head, the definition, the qualities, the yellowness and houseness, that's what Aquinas called its essence. Now, if you can also go out and touch that house, if it actually exists in physical reality, well, that's its existence. Simple enough, right? For Yellow House, essence and existence can totally go together.
Okay, now let's switch gears. I want you to think of a dragon. Easy, right? We all know what a dragon is. Big, scaly, has wings, breathes fire. We could all describe one in perfect detail. And here's the punchline. A dragon has a very clear essence. We all share that idea of what it is. But, and this is the whole point, it lacks existence. It isn't real. Aquinas used this distinction to show that the idea of something and its actual reality are two totally separate things. One does not automatically mean you get the other.
So why does any of this matter? Why are we talking about yellow houses and dragons? Because with these intellectual tools, Aquinas didn't just synthesize the ancient and medieval worlds. He built the very foundation that the modern world would be constructed on. He was setting the stage for the next great act in the history of thought.
And this brilliant idea, tabula rasa, or blank slate, is a perfect example. Building on Aristotle's work, Aquinas argued that we aren't born with knowledge already in our heads. Our minds start out as a blank slate, and it is through our experiences in the real, existing world, through our acts, that we gain knowledge and build our character. This was a completely radical break from the older ideas.
You can draw a direct line from this medieval thought all the way to the great debates of the modern world. The Renaissance picks up on this rediscovered human potential, and the central arguments of modern philosophy, between rationalists like Descartes and empiricists like John Locke, are, in so many ways, a direct continuation of the very same debate that Aquinas kicked off centuries earlier. The huge questions about where knowledge comes from didn't just start in the 17th century, they were forged back in the 13th. So, was it a dark age? Hardly. It was a foundational age, a time of synthesis and of incredibly profound questioning. Thinkers like Aquinas didn't have all the answers that modern science would later figure out, but they were the ones who forged the tools and first dared to ask the distinctly modern questions that we are still wrestling with today. Questions like the one that lies at the heart of it all. What comes first, the idea of who we are or the life we actually live?